Welcome, London, Angel Winters, and Justin Patrick Pierce. I was just saying, like, when you guys came on the screen, I was like, oh, this emotion of when I just was with you in intensive in the workshops has come to the surface because of the way that you both have impacted and touched my life in ways that I like. Even still, it's been maybe a month, and even still, I'm like, finding the words is really hard for me. But the work that I did with you guys recently, honestly, was the best and most challenging thing that I've ever put myself through. And the way that you guys hold the space and of transmission, and the way that it's incredible. So I just want to say firstly, thank you, because the work that you do, I so appreciate.
It was a pleasure having you.
Absolutely was.
And I'm excited to kind of share this today with what you guys do around intimacy, around this yogic practice that you guys have been studying for a decade. And the way in which, I know for me, it was my edge. When I came across this work, I recognized there's a lot of things that maybe I come up against or challenge me, but when it comes to like intimacy and going into that, there was this thing that was just like, I know that's where I need to go, but that's tough. And so I'm imagining that you guys get this a lot. This idea of intimacy is fearful for a lot of people. Why?
That's such a beautiful question.
What a great way to start.
Just before we started, you had mentioned that it's okay we bring depth to the conversation. That's something you and your listeners would be interested in. So we might as well just cut through and get straight to the heart of it. Sacred sexuality is a spiritual practice, is a spiritual sadhana, a form of non-postural yoga. And its purpose is to remind us, unite us with the divine. That's what we're doing. This isn't a strategy we're learning to be better at dating or get the person we want to finally marry us and commit forever, or to stop fighting, or to learn some techniques to have better orgasms and better sex. It's none of that. A lot of people do those things, and you can learn about those things, and that's wonderful. That's not what we do. That's not sacred sexuality. That's entertainment. That's tantalizing the sexual appetite and exploring, and it's fun, just like we can explore anything, but that's not what we're doing here. The work that we're doing here is to realize the divine in this right now moment, this present moment, as the condition of unconditional love. Love now in this present moment. Just surrender to that. So why are people afraid of love? Because we cannot surrender fully to that condition. We're contracted. We're afraid. What are we afraid of? At the heart of it, we're afraid of our own annihilation. We have this feeling, I'm alone. I'm not sustained. I'm separate. And it's this sense of separate self and trying to protect the separate self, trying to take care of and strategize and design some form of structure that sustains us indefinitely, such that we do not die, such that we can be cared for, such that we can trust what's going on around us ultimately. Because this fear that we have in love, it's not just about this. It's about this. It's about this relationship with the divine itself. Why are we here? This situation that we're in. And ultimately, it comes down to that fear of our own self-annihilation. To be afraid of life itself, the condition of life, that is love. So we contract. The heart contracts and hardens. And we try and strategize our relationships, our life, our finances, our food, our home. We protect ourselves in these shelters to secure this identity, to secure ourselves, to guarantee our future. And all the while, somehow we just continue to feel perpetually alone. Even if we're with our intimate partner lying next to them in bed, somehow they feel miles away. And we're wondering, is this it? I've got all this money, I've got this house, I've got all this food, I've got these beautiful opportunities in my life, I travel, I have all these beautiful things, and yet here I am feeling alone, feeling fear, constant. So maybe if I work harder, maybe if I earn more, maybe if I get this, maybe if I get that, maybe if I learn to have better sex, all of that will go away. And what we learn is that that's not true. None of that goes away. None of those strategies are effective because at the heart of what is there is ultimately we are afraid of life, the condition of life. We need to learn to surrender to that absolutely, and the byproduct, the natural byproduct of that is love. To simply surrender now. And that's what you experience in these workshops today.
Yeah. And surrender is this word that can be challenging for a lot of people, right? It's this, okay, cool, that sounds so, yeah, I'm just going to surrender. And then it's like, hang on, wait. it's that the actual feeling of it is that thing that I experienced in the work with you guys, because I get it up here logically, like when I was reading your book and reading David Data and like studying self-study, I was like, oh, I get it. I get this. It's really great. But I'm in solo practice and I can do this on my own and I can, that's easy. But then when it's in the moment and you actually have no choice but to surrender, that's when like I felt it. So what about when people are in relationships or people are in those times where your heart wants to close? How do you surrender?
It's interesting because if you think about if you were standing in front of someone and they pulled their fist up to punch you in the stomach, what's the first thing you would do?
Like close.
Tighten, right? You would literally tighten so the blow doesn't hurt as hard.
Mm-hmm.
What surrender requires is the complete softening of your entire body. Ultimately, if you're in the yogic practice at the highest level and you're in that more feminine, divine feminine expression, your body's going to be like a jellyfish. There's going to be, I call it like the dumb tongue. Like your tongue is just like, your belly's out. Your pelvic floor is a noodle. This is the ultimate yogic asana in the surrender practice for the divine feminine. Imagine if your experience of your whole life was someone punching you in the gut in relationship. And I asked you to stand in front of somebody who's going to punch you in the gut and ask you to become a jellyfish. That everything in your body would just be like, no way. Why would I do that when I've been hurt so many times? Why would I do that when I'm standing in front of my opposition? And ultimately, what we're teaching is how to experience the opposite sex, not as the opposition. How to recognize the difference between who is standing in front of you right here, right now, in this moment, versus collapsing that with everything from your birth on. Maybe even previous lifetimes on, right? Depending on your belief system. So we have these body minds that have all of these memories in them, traumas for many of us. Most women have a lot of trauma in their body. And then that creates a story about what's going to happen next. And surrender, the yogic asana of surrender, is a complete release, a complete softening, and ultimately letting his breath come in and open you from the inside out. For you to be able to do that, you need to be able to release everything that came before that moment, such that you're in that moment brand new. You need to have as much of a yes in your body as your no. Your no can be easily vocalized, such that if he loses your trust in a moment, you can immediately be a no, ouch, woo. You have the boundaries and the discernment inside of surrender. These are very advanced yoga asanas. And it's beautiful because the women who do this work they really become these fierce, embodied, divinely alive creatures, so present in each moment that they could literally animate whatever is there in that truth. And when he's showing up as a force that you would worship, you can fully take him in your body and surrender wide open. And if he loses consciousness in a moment, you aren't attached to the yes, boom, you're a no. And you wake him up through the reflection of your no, open-hearted. Finding that no without contraction. In other words, your no isn't yes, 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 ooh, no, no, right? No, no, you become yes, no, wake up. Ah, there you are. Yes, no, ah, you become this like wide open, alive creature reflecting in every moment. And by that, you help wake up your partner to the highest level of consciousness, moment to moment, as he's helping you wake up to the highest level of sensitivity and expression, encouraging you to be this expressive being. Moment by moment, you're doing this for each other. Do that for 10 years together. You're not even going to recognize each other from when you met. This is what sacred relationship is. This is what we're dedicated to. And this is what we are interested in transmitting in those workshops.
And I love that, London. I love the expressiveness that you just gave, because even I was going, oh yeah, like when you do that no, it's almost like this like petty little reaction where then you almost go, oh gosh. And then, but the one where you're like expressive, I was like, oh, like, they stay there. And I think, we've spoken about this, where the story for especially a woman who relates to a feminine essence is that I'm too much. And so I'll hold back this expressiveness or expression because it might come across like, whatever, like they might judge it or it's too much for them. They can't handle it. Can we talk about that? Because I know a lot of people relate to that.
I want to touch on this point because it's so important. And in our westernized language and culture, surrender means something. And men and women struggle with that idea, as you already expressed. But it's so important to recognize the way that Londin and I are using that word surrender. Because maybe something wants to move through you and you think this is too much, so I'm going to hide it and I'm going to give up on what I'm feeling and not show it and acquiesce and go along to get along and so on. That's not surrender, that's giving up. That's not surrender by any extent of what we're describing. The surrender that we're describing is surrendering to the truth of the heart. Here's this impulse of truth that is moving through you. To contract and not let it out is not surrender. It's the exact opposite of surrender. To surrender is, that fucking hurts. And then suddenly the truth of your heart is moving through you. There's an intensity to that. There's no giving up whatsoever. So when we talk about surrender for a man or a woman, it's allowing the authentic motion of the heart to move through you entirely without any form of contraction. That's surrender. And that looks fierce. That has nothing to do with giving up whatsoever. It's the exact opposite of giving up. It's allowing the force of the truth of your heart to move through you and be expressed entirely without shame or blame or judgment. So suddenly you go, I need to jump out of a plane. So surrender looks like, okay, let's go. And you follow the impulse to jump out of a plane. That's surrendering to the truth of your heart. That's surrendering to the deeper calling of purpose inside of you. So when you have a feeling and intimacy, to surrender to the truth of your heart looks like liberating, allowing that to exist in the field as love. That's what we mean by surrender.
Do you have a tangible example in relationships where this might show up? Like so people know what the truth of their heart might look like or feel like?
Yeah, there's a million ways. The truth of your heart is the truth of your heart. So this happens commonly, something we discussed at length last night in one of our talks. But let's say you're in a relationship with a partner, right? And you're relating and things are feeling good, and your heart feels open and this feels good and I can trust you, right? And then let's say he says something or does something that suddenly you're like, ooh, that didn't feel good. Do you know that moment?
Yeah.
So what typically happens in that moment? Like the very first, it's a small thing he does.
Like it would close. Yeah.
Exactly. You nailed it. Exactly. So that happens and he goes, ugh. Right? So there's a closure of the heart. That's the fight. That's fighting. That's contracting. That's not surrendering as love. That's not expressing as love. That is isolation, contraction, withdrawal from love. And then he does another, then another, then another. And you like freeze, you go in your head and you think about it and you're like, oh, this isn't feeling good. Okay, but there's this withhold. And at the point where this closes to the point where it becomes unbearable, there's a point of crisis. And that point of crisis is going to look like two things, potentially three. Every human's unique. Ultimately, generally, it looks like this. So the heart closes, and then you go, okay, I've been hurt before. I'm not opening this heart again. I don't trust. I need you to agree to X, Y, and Z and promise me you're going to be here with me forever for the rest of my life, and then I will open my heart again. So there's a strategy in place to protect this before it's run over. That's one way. Another way is you get to that point with him, it's been so hurt that you can't take it anymore, and you just blow up and spit venom. You know, not in a productive way, but just in a, you did this, you did that, you this, I can't, you are, that whole venom approach where we just blow our lid. Or we just completely crumble, run and hide, and close internally without expression whatsoever. And then that begins to eat us up from the inside out. Those are three possible scenarios that happen every time we've gone too far. That whole process, none of that has to do with surrender. That is the exact opposite of surrender. That is defending oneself, that is hardening up, that is fighting, that is resisting, that is not being love in any regard. So what would you do practically in that moment is this. You're in a good moment, things are feeling good. He says that one thing that loses trust a little bit, and you go, ouch. The heart gets hurt, and you go, ouch. That's shitty. Oh, that doesn't feel good. I'm losing trust. And the heart is allowed to be felt and heard and seen moment to moment. And then he can work with that. He shows who he is as a man only through that authentic expression. You only learn who your partner really is when the voice of your heart is fully expressed. And for you to allow your expression to come out in all of those little moments is the kind of surrender I'm talking about. You're surrendering to the truth of your heart moment to moment in relationship. He makes that one comment, he rubbernecks another woman, he, whatever it is, and you just go, ouch. That doesn't feel good. I'm losing trust. That's surrendering to the truth of your heart as love.
Are you literally saying that out loud?
Yes.
Yes. Because sometimes we internalize stuff, right? We're like,
well, exactly. The process of you internalizing it is closing.
Mm-hmm.
So your practice, your yogic practice, is to stay in your heart space. The second you close and internalize, the energy moves from your heart and body and goes into your head and starts strategizing, is this safe? If I say that, is he going to run away? Am I going to lose love by saying this thing? It's better if I just don't express it, and then I will preserve love. But what happens all of the time instead is the exact opposite. When you move out of your heart and go into your head and start strategizing, you depolarize him. Because he feels you just withdrawing and taking care of yourself. So he's like, she's fine. And I'm not attracted to him for some reason. Like, there's no more polarity here. So I'll just do my thing. Oh, are you okay? Do you want to do our thing again? No, you're not ready yet? Okay, we'll keep doing it. Like, it just, and what's so tricky about it is you think you're preserving the relationship and love by withholding the truth of your heart. But in truth, it's just creating these patterns of relating where you're protecting yourself instead, and you're becoming your own alpha. Mm-hmm. Therefore, his alpha is no longer needed in the picture, and that's what he's going to feel. He's going to feel, what does she need? She's good. She's fine. She's in a mood. I get that, but she's fine. She doesn't need me. Whereas if you go, ouch, I'm hurting, I'm lost, that doesn't feel good, I'm losing trust, there's an entry point for him to be alpha for you. And if we're talking about preserving polarity, that must be the case. We must preserve that. And that takes the act of surrender to the truth of the heart.
Yes, I love that. Okay, polarity. So polarity is this way in which we can preserve this, but also deepen our intimacy, right? So how does people who are understanding what we're talking about here with constricting and not surrendering, and, you know, oh yeah, that my woman's good, or my man's good because they're looking after themselves. Like, how do we bring polarity into our relationships to deepen intimacy?
The basic thing to know about polarity is that opposites creates attraction. We all, we know this in our language, opposites attract. In our current culture, we are becoming whole human beings, and this is beautiful, right? We are all evolving so fast, and we are becoming so mindful and aware, and we literally can, as a woman, for example, we can go out and make as much money as we want. We can buy ourselves whatever we want. We can create clarity in our life of knowing exactly where we're going and what we're doing. It's kind of like we don't really need anything anymore because we've got it. Like, it's not the 1950s anymore where a man sort of made everything okay for us. That wholeness, while incredibly powerful and beautiful and needed and an absolute necessary step, has a tendency to ruin sexual charge, because you take one person who's whole and you put them together with another person who's whole, and there's not a lot to create that, like, you complete me thing, where you literally have two things that are not sexually charged. They're complete unto themselves. For you to experience that wild, passionate, amazing thing that is love, that is sort of heat and wanting each other, we need to surrender some of our wholeness and literally allow ourselves to have a space that can be filled. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is great sex? It's filling up my space as fast as you can get there. Well, we can actually choose to be this. So we're whole. We're walking around our lives as these really amazing, enlightened whole beings. And then in a moment where we want an incredible sexual dynamic, we can learn how to literally surrender some of that wholeness and allow him to occupy one half of the sexual pole. So in the sexual pole, you have the divine feminine over here and the divine masculine over here. Because it's not gender related, we call the divine feminine omega and the divine masculine alpha. Let's say you've been at work all day, you've been kicking butt, taking names, doing everything you want, manifesting, having a great time. You're whole unto yourself and you're about to go on a date and you want to feel it as amazing. You can do a little practice to give up some of your alpha, right? Get into your body, begin to sort of step yourself over in that omega pole where you feel like, I don't know, what restaurant do you want to go to? You pick. Maybe he opens your door and you willingly love that because somebody's actually providing some structure for you and you are able to receive again. These are the things that every modern woman needs to do to feel that sexual juice back. She needs to learn how to give up maybe her alpha side, the one that's completely self-sufficient, knows where it's going, knows what to do, doesn't really need anything from anyone, and come over there into the part of her that yearns to be ravished, that doesn't have to think so much, that doesn't have to constantly care for herself, and let someone else do that for her. And then what does she do the next morning? Boop. She puts back on her whole self. She takes all of that juiciness that she felt that night before, what does she do in the world? She creates like we've never seen before.
So good. And I totally I get that wholeheartedly. And the practice at the moment of bringing more of this like transition from work to play and inserting like a whole bunch of pleasure just before, like, it's like just dropping into the body, and how much of a difference it makes. Like from that point of work to like, I call it play, that transition period, I don't care what happens. I'm like, I don't care what we do. I don't care I don't know. I just don't even want to think anymore. It's like fully you're in your body and you're just like, it just feels so good. I just want to be here now. But prior to this, knowing this, I was not like that. Like I was, someone could say, let's go to this restaurant. I'd be like, no, let's go here. Like it was like had my masculine or alpha pants on like all the time. And I didn't know how to soften or be in that space of surrender or like allow to be led. All right. I just know I was the one that was in control, even though, deep down you're like, you just want someone to just look after you. So I love that, it's about dropping into your body and having those pleasure practices to be able to create that. I would be really interested to know, like, from the alpha perspective and from, if we're saying from a man-woman perspective, does the man ever want that? Like, does the man ever want to just like be in his omega energy? And what's that? How do you dance between those energies and not staying in one or the other?
That's a really good question. Delicate question depending on who you're speaking to. There's going to be a group of men who will never care to engage that omega expression within themselves. It's all about the alpha expression. They're going to live and die by that. That's just who they are. So that's one group. There's another group who are helplessly not cultivated in alpha or omega, but just happen to not be developed in either. And they really would be served by developing their alpha, getting in touch with themselves as a masculine creature, as a man in the world. And they struggle to find out what that means. They're not finding it anywhere. They're not knowing how to do that. So they flounder. They flounder with their ability to make money. They flounder with their ability to choose and powerfully penetrate the world. They flounder with what their purpose is in life, and they just kind of float, meander. And it's a very disempowering position for men to be in, profoundly painful. And the man in that position needs to cultivate that alpha. He certainly does. There's a group of men who naturally orient towards that omega side, and they love to dance, and they're expressive, and they're artistic, and they flow, and they're allowing themselves to be radiant in so many different ways. And men of all sexual orientations are exploring this. We have tons of different names for all of it these days, but it's actually culture in a certain way, embracing this idea that men too can be radiant in a certain regard, and be that expressive light in the world and shine in that way. So those individuals, they have a certain relationship with being in that omega expression. That can be such a gift. It is such a gift when done, cultivated as something that's profound. They could be just as radiant and expressive as any woman in the world. And that's what we see. It's common. So kind of pointing at the heart of your question is, and I think this is your question, maybe you can refine, but it's kind of like, here as a man, as a whole being, I've got knowledge of this alpha and omega, and I can see the value of alpha, right? Because in our culture, in our world, that's why women have developed alpha. That's why women today, under the age of 30, more of them are going to law school than men. More of them are graduating college than men. This is across the entire country, the United States. More of them are becoming lawyers and doctors than men. And they're starting to earn more money than men. And that's going to shift the whole dynamic. So we have this whole generation of women who are out alpha in men. It's not a prediction, it's a fact. It's already taken hold. And now these individuals are just going to mature in their 40s and 50s and 60s until the next generations come up. So our daughter's going to be not know any other, like, of course women are, in charge and earning more, seriously. So then masculine and feminine kind of falls on its head, and then we recognize men and women are whole human beings. We have these whole capacities. The thing is that the demand in our Western culture is for alpha energy, because alpha makes decisions and earns money through that capacity, through those functions. As being a doctor, the more alpha you are, the more people you're in charge of, the more bigger decisions you have to make. And that alpha energy in the world typically gets paid more, right? But what's really interesting in our culture is now with social media, we're seeing radiance begin to pay for itself. So if I have a YouTube channel and I'm an entertainer, if I have Instagram and beautiful photos, I can actually earn a living on that and become an entertainer. Like an actor is a form of radiance in the world, because I'm expressing my light as radiance. So if you want to see me, all artists, musicians, they're omega energy, right? So if you're on a stage and you're the brightest thing in 10,000 people, you're filling a stadium of 10,000 people, you are light. That is the omega expression, man or woman. So then you're paid for that. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So there are means of men and women earning in that omega expression, right? The question comes in when it's, how do we maturely cultivate these gifts inside of ourselves such that we would want to bring them to our intimate partner or our children? So me as a man, I want to share a personal story just very quickly, is what does this look like in my life? Because of this practice, I can go be the caretaker and nurturer for my 9-month-old daughter. And I can sing and dance and do baby shark and, and just be a total clown and really nurture her from a playful, changing diapers, feeding, like that nurturer is just fully alive in me. There's no withhold. It's not awkward. It's just fully immersed in that. And it is so pleasurable. I can feel what the gift that is to her and the gift it is to my partner, who during those times is in her alpha, earning and, bringing her gift to the world, right? And then we switch and she becomes caretaker and nurturer. And then I come here and I'm the provider. I'm the leader of this family. I am the protector, without question. This practice has allowed me to cultivate the entire spectrum of both. There's not awkwardness in either dimension. And that's the gift that I can bring my family and my loved ones as a lover. So there's certain times where it's a gift for me to bring that omega, nurture, caretaker, love, humor, expression, creative, playing music. All of that comes out as a gift to her, my child. And then there's times where that's not a gift. I need to get clear. I need to be serious. I need to decide. I need to earn. I need to provide. I need to protect. And throw that into full motion, and I can play that note. This is the gift that every man can also cultivate, that all women are just by necessity already learning to cultivate.
Do you think that that's because you have a good relationship with your own omega energy as to why you can do it in a really beautiful way, and that perhaps men that do struggle with bringing out that omega energy is because they've repressed it within themselves, and so they'll struggle to talk about feelings or be in that space, or they're kind of hyper masculine, or like in their alpha, like no, can't be anything else but this. Like, do you think that's because of their relationship to that? And so maybe it's like also coming out into their intimacy and their relationship with their partner?
Of course it is, yes. I personally have gone through all these phases. I've gone through my hyper macho phase. I've gone through my superficial, needy, desperate, feminine phase where I need to be seen and all this nonsense. I've gone through all of these phases myself. That's why I know about it intimately. I'm no stranger to this process, right? But my uncultivated omega expression in my body was a problem for our relationship initially. because for me, I enjoyed being seen by other women, lots of them. You know, as a fitness professional, I took pride in my body and my aesthetic. I loved being seen by other people. And I loved her very much. Yet when I would move around the world, I still noticed this need to be seen and adored and desired by other women. It was there, it was like lingering as this toxic, unfully expressed part of me. And for years, I was like, okay, well, I need to become more masculine, was the language I was using at that time. So I started to divorce myself from that part of my identity and try and like will it out and become so masculine that it was not there anymore. And after years of that process, I began to discover that's not my truth. That's not a gift to me. It's not a gift to her, actually. It's a fucking facade. Even if it is divine masculine practice, it's a fucking facade. I have an authentic Omega expression. I'm an artist by nature. I enjoy being radiant, but not in a selfish, self-possessed way, in a way that my radiance really could be used as a gift. So what I had done, that was one of the most beautiful sadhanas I'd ever done in my life, was I decided to join a band. I'm not a professional musician, but I dabble in music, and I auditioned to be part of a band, and I became the lead singer, and I toured the world for 3 years.
Whoa.
And I was on stage in front of thousands and thousands of people, multiple times a month, in Mexico, Japan, all over the country. And it was through that expression I realized there was this part of me that needed to be kind of seen, essentially. And this was a way for me to get that out of my system, to move that flow through it in a way that was constructive and productive and not damaging to who I wanted to be and how I wanted to love in the world. And after 3 years, I got to the point where I was like, wow, I don't care if I never get on stage ever again. I don't need to be seen in that way ever again. And it was like the veil just dropped. Something had healed in it. And it was through that sadhana that I made it through the other side. But only by surrendering to the impulse to touch that fully, to be seen fully, was I able to come out on the other side and recognize it in my authenticity. There was a facade in that. And now what's there is something entirely different, a maturity in that Omega expression that wasn't there before. That's no longer the thing that's slowly corroding my relationship, but now it is a gift to her and to my child.
And now you're just not on a stage, but you're just like, baby shark, serving you. It's good. It's good. Londin, in that process, would you call him out in those times? Like, how would you express how it was making you feel?
Yeah, well, that's how we figured out that it was toxic. You know, just in those stories alone, you can hear we've been together for over a decade. We have gone through everything together as a sadhana. Sacred relationship is no joke. You know, rather than me being like, man, you have this toxic feminine thing, and I'm going to go look for a better masculine. You know, that's what I wanted to do. Just be like, meh, you know, I don't want to deal with this. I want to be the radiant one, you know, because when he shines bright, I suddenly feel polarized into my alpha, and I'm becoming straighter, and I'm worrying about money, you know, like it's amazing how we polarize each other in relationships. So it's not just like, I want to be the radiant one. It's also like, how come I can't stop thinking about my to-do list right now? Because he's over there doing this, and I'm polarizing into my alpha, whether I want to or not. Right? So sacred relationship is no joke. We are constantly affecting each other. It's constantly seeing, you know, revealing what is undigested in our mandala. How did I deal with it? Rather than being like, we talked about the heart, you know, we're walking down the street, my heart's doing this, and then he like creates an arc with another woman so that he can find out if she thinks he's sexy, right? And my heart goes like, you know, I'm just like, instead of like maybe this relationship isn't the one, or Venom, what the F are you doing? Closed heart, go after him. Or, just be like, I'm fine, that sucks. Then we're at lunch and I'm like, I'm fine, and then I wonder why the relationship just becomes like hardcore nothing. You know what I mean? Like, all of those things were the responses I wanted to have, because I didn't want to have the response I did have, because it's so vulnerable. And I could cry right now just sharing this. It's like, I'm here having a great day with him. He creates an arc with another woman. He looks over at me and I show him this. Ow. You know, we were in a moment and you just triangulated the moment away from us. My heart hurts. That's what I did. It's as much as that is just show him how it felt, not find my power and show him my anger, but like show him what it really felt like, which it really, in my most vulnerable, honest place, it felt like, wow. And, I had to really get over feeling pathetic in my expression, because you want to find your power in that moment. You want to like hurt the hurt, like, you hurt me, I hurt you back. Or you hurt me, I go numb. Or you hurt me, I just check out and now we're done. Right? Like, there were thousands of times I could have done this. And instead, I just kept literally doing what he said. Like, here's my heart, and this is what it feels like right now.
Powerful. And that's more powerful, isn't it? Like, we think in our head, like, I know there's been times in my head where I'm like, okay, the most powerful thing to do in this scenario would be to act cool, like, so I'm low maintenance now and I don't want to be high maintenance. And so I'm like, that's fine. I'll handle that later. Like, going to this cool thing. And what I learned in, like, even being in the co-ed with you and having all these men just like hold this space for you to like express whatever needed to be expressed. And every story that I've ever told myself about being too deep or too much or whatever, like, just expressing it was the thing that they complimented on, was the thing that they said, the gift that you brought was this. And I was like, serious? Like, that's the stuff that I hide because I think it's not, like, it shouldn't be out. And that's the thing that they see in the moment, that they see the gift, and that they gives them the energy that they needed in that time, in that moment. And that for me was life-changing, because I think yeah.
Why do you think it is more powerful? What is it about it that you just felt that made it more powerful than me going like, I'm bulletproof and wait until you see what happens to you, buddy,
Yeah.
Why was my authentic expression more powerful, if you had to guess?
Because it made me feel something in my heart.
It awakened the moment to truth. Truth, right? Truth of the moment is the thing everyone is so hungry for. And we keep getting farther and farther away from it in our society. Somebody was just telling me the story that they were sitting next to a woman and she was really beaten up, looked like she was having like the worst day of her life. They were at the beach. And she took a photo, got the perfect pose, like smiled just right, perfect angle, and then posted on social, like all caps, like, this is amazing. But in reality, she was literally having like the most saddest day of her life. And the person who observed this just felt so devastated for her that, we're all propping up these images of being like so greater than life. And yet, what our soul is hungering for is that piercing truth of the moment. And you can become this for your man. You can give that gift to your man. And in the moment when you pierce the truth, you pierce the moment with the truth of your heart, you literally awaken consciousness. And consciousness is the essence of alpha that every woman wants to be ravished by. So in that moment, rather than reducing myself to some tit for tat BS game of pretending to be something I'm not, I'm the one. I'm the leader of love. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be in the moment as much as I can. And I'm going to invite him back into the moment, into the truth of the moment. Not as like blaming him, but like, hey, what are you doing? And he looks at me like, I mean, it got to the point where he would look at me and just be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And then he started to realize out of his own volition, what am I doing? And then he started to look, oh my God, I'm actually craving to be seen. And rather than making that wrong and being like, well, he did for a little while, like, I should be more alpha. I should not care about being seen. I'll give you the radiance, you know, that was just as much BS, because that's not the truth of the moment either. We both have these very multi-dimensional personalities, and we polarize in many different ways. Like sometimes when I come home and I'm in all boss bitch mode, he just looks at me and he's like, oh my God, you are so hot. Because he has the ability to appreciate that, you know? So our relationship became so much better when we gave up the dogma and started to be committed, devoted, utterly in service of the truth of the moment. And then everything just righted itself. Just the right amount of alpha for me and omega for me, just the right amount of alpha for him. It was like the universe knew more about our dynamic than our ideas did. And when we finally just let all the BS go, even our training, right? Some of our training was like the biggest nightmare for us because we had these ideas of what things are going to be. When we let all that go and just let the heart show, it was like, yeah, we are soulmates. And like, it's so odd the way we're so perfect for each other. And the dance of going back and forth, alpha and omega, in these perfect ways is just exhilarating. And I get to be a badass modern woman and be appreciated for that, right? I don't lose polarity when I go into my alpha because he's like, ah, cool, omega. And then he trumps me and he becomes a bigger alpha than I could be. And I'm like, ah, you know, like just when I was getting sick of being in charge, you know? And it is so good. And I believe that there are so many people, if they would just liberate themselves, are just destined to have this amount of vibrancy. You know, that heteronormative thing we're all throwing out. Let's explore all the notes and see where we fit together.
So good. And so how can people do this? Where can they go to explore? Where can they go to find out more about what you guys do?
Londin and I have a monthly webinar on Patreon. So patreon.com/Londin Angel Winters.
Londin, Londin.
Londin Angel Winters. And there you can follow us. And we have a live monthly webinar broadcasted all over the world.
It's only $10.
Yeah, you can come
so
and
good.
ask questions, all of that. We have our book, The Awakened Woman's Guide to Everlasting Love. It's on Amazon. You can just check that out on Amazon. That's an amazing starting place. All of our stories, our practices, you're going to get in there. And then we have the Yoga of Intimacy, which you've experienced. In-person weekend intensive where we bring 24 men and women together to do a deep dive in all of these practices we've been touching upon in this call. And that can be found on Londin's site, londinangelwinters.com.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll link all that up as well for people to find. And, you know, and before we wrap things up, I just want to touch on practice, the word practice, because you talk about this still now, being on together over a decade. It's still, you know, a practice for you guys. And I think some things that I hear is, you know, from alpha men, that they're like, oh yeah, but like they want to do it for like a day and then it doesn't work, and so give up. Or like, you know, it's like, what does this work mean to practice?
What Londin just described, the way she would show her hurt in that moment to me, that's her practice. That's what practice looks like. And when she would show me that exact expression she just described on this call, the first time I'm like, what? You know, totally unaware. And then she feels the hurt of that and she's like, fuck, okay. Then the next moment comes up where it happens again. And she shows it again. And that's her practice. And then I'm like, is something going on that I'm not aware of? And then she's like, oh. And then we go through life again. And then the moment happens again. And she does exactly the same thing. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Something's going on here. and time after time after time. She didn't do this one time and I was cured.
Years of that.
But all of us are going to take years to change our habitual ways of relating. All of us. I don't care who you are, how enlightened you think you are. You have your closures and your nasty ways of unconsciously navigating relationships in the world. And until someone is willing to wake you up by the authentic expression of their heart, you will remain blind and unconscious to the impact and why you're creating the same relational patterns again and again and again. So what is practice? It's a willingness to wake up our partner in the right now moment to the expression of the truth of the heart again and again and again and again. That's practice. No one needs to know that we're practicing. It's our devotion and commitment to that willingness to show up. It's not easy for women to do what she described doing. She had to bypass all of her habitual ways of responding to that. And just as I will have to bypass all of mine to awaken her in moments. It's back and forth. That's practice. No one needs to know you're ever practicing, but it's your willingness to come back to that active surrender to love. Surrender to allowing the heart to be seen and expressed to your partner that you wish to love more deeply and connect more deeply. That will deepen your intimate relationships and continue to wake you up for the rest of your life. That's practice.
And in the book, we talk about it starts when you're single. It starts right now. It doesn't start when you meet your man or your woman. It starts right now with your relationship with life itself.
Yeah. And that was said perfectly. And I love that. And I highly recommend people check out your book. Like, I am not a huge reader, but I think I read it in like 48 hours. It's like, it's life-changing, and it has both perspectives, which is incredible. So like, you can get a feel for both, and it just gives you the practices along the way. So when you read something and you go, cool, but I don't get it, you're like, okay, breathe. And then, okay, do this exercise and then do this. And it's like, you begin to change whilst you're reading it, and you begin to have the practices to do whilst you're there. And I think that's so valuable. So I really respect you guys. I honor you so much for the work that you do in this world, because it is honestly life-changing. And for people that are resonating with this and have this kind of, like this thing that I got when I was like this, I need to look more into this, then I highly recommend it, because you have no idea what blind spots are there that can open up so much joy and opportunity into your life. So thank you for sharing this today and for the work that you do.
We would love to have you back anytime.
Oh, I'd so love to be back. Oh, I love it. But yeah, thank you so much. Lots of love.
Lots of love back to you.